We often sort of mention sin, Jesus dying for sin, Jesus dying to pay the penalty for sin. What do we mean by sin? What actually is sin? What's the essence of sin? The Bible uses a whole host of different ways of describing what sin is like. But at the root of it, sin is this. This is from the Westminster Catechism and the Baptist Catechism, and it says, what is sin? It says, sin is any want of conformity unto or transgression of the law of God. In other words, not conforming to God's law or breaking God's law. That's why 1 John says, sin is lawlessness, breaking God's command. Whether that's on a huge global scale and the massive commands, or even the sort of small day-to-day stuff. Sin is not living up to God's standards or actively breaking God's standards, his laws. That's what we mean by sin. Now, that might not be sort of revolutionary to you. You may have heard something of that before. It's breaking God's commands. But on some level, it's even deeper than that. Because why do we do those things? Why do we break God's laws? Well, I think it's because we have misdirected loves. We love the wrong things. Ultimately, we break the laws because our love has gone wrong. We love the wrong things. There's a chap in the 4th century called Augustine, and he said, when we ask whether somebody is a good person, we're not asking what he believes or hopes for, but what he loves. He goes on to say, human morality, human good deeds, the good stuff that we do, or other people do, is driven by something. It's driven by love. What you love, you will end up doing. Or to put it negatively, when we sin against God, or we sin against our fellow human beings, it's because we don't love them enough. It's the lack of love, or a misdirected love, that causes us to break God's commands. Or think of it like this. You will show love and courage and sort of sacrifice for someone. You might give your life for someone or for a cause if you love them more than your own comfort. If you love your own comfort more than you love them, you may love them a little bit, but if you love your own comfort more, you won't sacrifice for them. The key thing, of course, is not just a lack of love, but it's a disorder of love, having the wrong order of love. Sometimes there are things that we love that are good things to love, but we just love them too much. Things like our family, our hobbies, our work, things that we ought to love, and yet ultimately we ought to love God more. So, for example, if we love our children or our family more than we love God, perhaps that will mean that we put unrealistic expectations on them. We will crush them. Or if we love our job, our business more than we love God, we'll end up exploiting our employees because we love that more than we love God's commands. Ultimately, it means if we love ourselves more than we love God, well, we'll be rule breakers because we'll just live for our own preferences. We'll be our own lawmakers. We'll reject God's law. The reason for all of that is because we've loved the wrong things. We've had a misdirected, a disorder of love. That's why the Bible often talks about spiritual adultery. It talks about spurning God, going after lovers. You can see that in our passage. Verse 2, she had lovers. Or verse 19, it says, I called for my lovers, but they deceived me. It wasn't just that they'd broken God's laws. They'd done that because they'd loved the wrong things. Their hearts had gone astray. That's why Jesus says the 2 greatest commandments are what? To love God and love neighbor, because those are the most fundamental things. If you love God, you will obey him. You will keep his commands. It's the very essence of sin.